right, good evening, everybody. Good evening. Hope everyone's recovering from last night's loss. Welcome to the Colonial School District curriculum meeting for February 13th. And I'd like to call this meeting to order. Do we have any public comment at this time?
We do not.
No. Okay, great. All right, I'm going to pass it along to Mrs. Grigaitis.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. And again, welcome to February's meeting. This evening on our agenda, we have a few things. We are starting, as we explained to you guys a meeting or two ago, something that we're going to call Conference Showcase. Thank you to Joe Passetti for naming that. We are very appreciative of the board supporting endeavors for conferences. So after conferences, we are asking participants to come back and share with the board what they've learned and how it is going to ultimately impact the learning of our students. So we have some guests to explain that to you this evening. We are also going to talk about emergency instructional days or flexible instructional days. They are terms that are used interchangeably. I'll explain that a little bit later. We're going to revisit our summer opportunities and provide you an update on our summer reading for the district. So first and foremost, again, we know the conferences are essential for professional development for all of our staff, and they're also beneficial to all of our students. So we're going to start with Mr. Passetti, and he is going to explain about the National Council for Social Studies Conference.
Thank you, Mrs. Grigaitis. So this evening, I have a representative from Plymouth White Marsh High School, Mr. Monero, who will be joining us this evening to discuss his experience along with a cohort of teachers from PW at the NCSS annual conference. The team was remarkably fortunate to have this national council convene in Philadelphia this year. So the commute was very easy. Couldn't think of a better place too. So Chris, if you want to come on up, have a brief discussion of some of the session highlights, some takeaways and ways that those are going to be integrated into our classrooms.
But before I forget to say, next year's conference is in Nashville. I'm willing to attend as an experienced member if needed. I do want to thank you for giving us the time tonight. And I went to this conference December, first weekend of December. Myself, Jen Hanold, who teaches U.S. government and some electives at the high school, Sharice Haltman, who teaches our 11th grade course, and Lindsay Dale, who also teaches 10th, 11th grade and some electives. So we were able to send some representatives in various content areas throughout social studies. The conference really drew our attention because of the themes this year, which really brought a lot of relevance to current issues facing social studies curriculum. So connecting educators as learners and that whole idea that we're always learning. Really like that one because a lot of times you hear that, you know, while just being a content expert doesn't make you a good teacher, having expertise in content makes it easier to be good. And I think the more we can expand our own knowledge, even after teaching some of these courses year after year, it certainly is beneficial. The other themes were very relevant and very current: teaching civil discourse, embracing hard history, those two that really sort of go hand in hand, building critical media literacy, fostering global citizens, and my favorite, and the last one as a U.S. government teacher, navigating the political landscape in teaching social studies. So all the sessions in some way, shape, or form really revolved around those basic ideas. These were just sort of some of the samples of the sessions that we attended throughout Saturday and Sunday. I won't read all of these to you, but just point out a few because they are by title rather self-explanatory. The first one, taking informed action, that was a big theme in a lot of the sessions, the idea of taking action and students being involved in real-world scenarios. I think in social studies, especially as students get older, in civics certainly I see it, there's an opportunity for students to really be out there participating and doing things where they can take action and make a difference. So that was an ongoing theme. There were several sessions dealing with freedom of speech and what can be said, what can't be said. Some of the ones on here that deal more with global perspectives, European colonialism, anti-Semitism. And then the last one I'll actually get into in a minute, the one called Pirates and Punks. So they're always nice when they have catchy titles because they tend to get big crowds. The one on the National Constitution Center, I'll point out too that one of the great things about these conferences is always the vendor sessions. And I think that in social studies, for as much as we hear about emphasis and movements toward sometimes teaching less. I think for every group that's out there advocating we don't learn things, there's probably 5 or 6 groups advocating for our students to learn more. And so much that's free, so much is at our fingertips. And the Constitution Center is just one example of one of those resources. Whoop. There we go. Some more sessions. These are some of the ones that were a little bit more designed towards civics. Disagreeing without being disagreeable. I just thought that was a really good idea and a thought there. There was one on the America 250 celebration, which is going to be happening in 2026, the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And there was really just a panel discussion, but I thought that was something to bring back to be on the lookout for as ways possibly for our schools and our students to get involved right here in the Philadelphia area. The civics in real life, again, that sort of action-based real-world connection. And there were some sessions that were very specific to topics that we cover, something like gerrymandering, which is a concept that might be complicated for students until they really break it down and learn it kind of creatively. So those were just, a variety of some of the sessions. Some of the big takeaways that we really kind of came away with, the 4 of us, I sort of had us all put together some of our favorites. One of the ones on there that I thought was interesting was the idea the censor always rings twice, was a session that Jen Howland went to talking about censorship, and if you're willing to censor one side, then the other side might have that come back to them as well. The idea of student engagement, and of course that's something we always preach here. A lot of these sessions are creative in that they teach you about certain content, but many of them are being run by teachers, so they're really showing you how they teach something and giving you kind of a sample lesson to take with you. So that came through a few times. It was interesting to me to learn about some of the people there from other areas. There was an organization from Florida. It was actually a university, and they do some programs for schools and a lot of real hands-on stuff. And listening to them talk about what their teachers in Florida are not allowed to say, it really just, again, kind of gave that open perspective. A lot of resources, a lot of current things that they brought. And then that one I had mentioned, with the catchy title, one of our teachers, Sharice Haltman, came back and had that notion of something like that session could provide the basis for possibly a future elective, just teaching about youth resistance and youth movements. So, those are some of the highlights, some of the takeaways, kind of an overview of the sessions and the themes. And anytime you go to the convention center for a conference, the best part is going to Nick's for a roast pork. So I wanted to share my lunch with everybody because that was top 10 favorite parts of the conference. So I'll get that off of there. But any questions, I'd be happy to answer. All right. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. Back on October 27th, myself and the curriculum the mathematics department head and liaisons had the opportunity to go to the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit to see a conference from a math professional developer named Robert Kaplinski. And the title to the conference is exactly what we have here. It's the 4 steps to create a math classroom where students are excited to learn mathematics. So he had the 4 steps. One was, what does it mean to understand something? And an interesting article I linked here, and I won't pull it up today, but when you have a chance, check it out. It says, never ask a question a horse could answer. And it kind of gets into, are we always checking for the right understanding when we're asking students questions, or are we just looking for the right answer? The next step is to also look at unforgettable lessons. Pick lessons that are simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional, ones that have stories. And the one story the speaker showcased was, how much does the aluminum foil prank cost? Now, I'll just click on this so you can see a picture. But the aluminum foil prank is a prank where you wrap somebody's office in aluminum foil. So have students estimate what that would look like, even though we're not going to try to tell students to do that. We don't want to see everyone's offices wrapped in aluminum foil. But it was just an interesting, how do you get students, what are those, it'd be one of those unforgettable lessons. Go back. The next was real-world-based learning. So if you ever buy a package a variety pack of chips, how do you decide how many chips go in each box, or how many different types of chips? So this lesson here is a way to get students to collect data and do the analysis of, well, okay, if everybody prefers sun chips over just plain chips, should we put more sun chips than plain chips in a box? So a lot of data analysis there, and a lot of what is it that companies do to market their product and create the things that they sell. Toilet paper math. There were 2 sessions, though, that we kind of walked away, and I have 2 representatives here from Colonial Elementary School. They're going to talk about open middle problems and 3-act tests. These were 2 other unforgettable lessons, or lessons that we would say have higher depth of knowledge problems to them. And we have Jared Kubinoff, 4th grade teacher, and Danelle Bratz, 5th grade teacher, to talk about these other 2 that we thought would be really beneficial for our students.
So open middle problems is something that Mr. Koplinski is very well known for, and they're very accessible on the internet, so we can download them and use them right away, which is a great thing. So it's not a lot of preparation on teachers' part to make everything. But an open middle problem is what it says. The beginning is closed. Everyone's starting with the same thing. The end is closed. Everyone has the same goal. It's just the middle, how they get there, is completely different. And we have an example to show you. So it's really these kind of problems, the conversation that students have about these problems, how they get from point A to point B, is really where their learning is. So I'm going to skip this and go to the next one. So these are examples of open middle problems. So you can see that sometimes they give them some of the digits, other times they're completely blank. But what this really does is, instead of just saying, can you add 3 numbers together, which is a level 1 on the depth of knowledge, this turns it into a level 2 or a level 3. So you could do it a level 2 and say, make a sum that's greater than 1,000. So there's more than one answer, but they're getting to the same goal. Or you can say, what's the way to make the greatest sum of all, which is even a higher level, so a level 3 kind of understanding for that. So this, instead of just having kids solve problems and do a page of 50 math problems, not that we do that anymore, but this really gets them more engaged in it because they're thinking about what they're doing. They have a challenge to meet, and they really enjoy working through it and thinking about it and having conversation about, how did you get there? This is what I thought. So the students really enjoy doing these, and it really does have good conversation. And sometimes, depending on how you make them, some of the level 3, I have a student that's been working on one for like months because she just loves it and she just wants to keep going to see if she can find more answers. So it is really, really engaging for them. But we also learned about how to make them. So again, he has a lot of different examples, but also if you think about a concept that you teach that's like a rote process kind of thing, how can you take that and turn it into an open middle? So we all had to practice making that as well, which was in its own way a little bit challenging. But again, it was worth it, and the students love doing these.
Hi, I'll talk about 3-act math. If you see the problem on the board, it's a pretty basic problem that you'll see every day in a 4th grade classroom. It connects to their life. They're talking about trick-or-treating. They've all had that personal experience. And they're engaged. They're doing multiplication in a level that they're comfortable with. But this lesson isn't memorable. It's really not connecting to any sort of depth of knowledge, and it's not really something that kids would kind of remember and kind of come back to. It's something that they'll see on the PSSA, they would see on a test. It's a perfectly fine question. But what 3-act math does is it allows students to really have these connections to what they're learning and to really dive into it and to have these kind of like end of their seat moments. So basically what we do is we just hit play. And kids all of a sudden are, oh, this is not a normal math class. What is going on here? And they're starting to think and think and think deeper into it. And then we just open up the floor and we say, so what is the problem? What do you think we're trying to get here? And now the wheels start turning. And now they start really thinking about, oh, this is math? Like me filling up a jar of Skittles is math? Okay. So now we start to formulate, okay, what is the question? What do we think? What do we wonder? How could we ask this? How could this actually show up on a worksheet? And then we ask them to estimate. And 10-year-olds are really terrible at estimating. They're awful at it. They'll say 1,000, they'll say 5. But it really allows now a question to think of, Okay, now we're really trying to estimate. Now we're going to multiply. Now we're going to divide. And you slowly start to give them other ones. We'll sort of say, okay, now here's our part 2. What do you want from me? What can you get out of this? All right, I'll tell you how many packages of Skittles there are. There's going to be 58. And then, all right, what else can I tell you? And they say, well, how many Skittles are in a pack? And then you reveal this. And there really are these edge-of-the-seat moments. And then the last part is, okay, you got it, go for it. Now do that multiplication problem, which again is this. But now all of a sudden there's a vibe in the classroom. People are buzzing. They all want to communicate and go with it. And then the third act is the reveal. So then the reveal gets into this even deeper amount. So now kids they're like salivating at what this could be. So now they're having 10 Skittles of piles. So now we're talking about arrays. We're talking about organizing numbers. We're talking about what's the best way to do this. And they're waiting for that moment because they have this number that they've all kind of come together and had. And at the very last part, the actual reveal is that it is not the number that they thought. So the answer is not 812. So if they do the math correctly, it is 812, and now they're angry. So now we got anger into a math lesson that the kids don't get angry in math. So now it goes into, well, why could that be? Well, maybe actually we weigh Skittle packs. So in the real world, math isn't always perfect. And it just connects onto all these different levels. And it's just it's a different environment that we're now experiencing in math that, this is perfectly fine, but this is just at a level now where we can connect back to that lesson and they have that kind of joint experience that we can always talk about. And really the goal is that we introduce something like this for every unit. So then when we talk about fractions and decimals, we use a video for that. And when we talk about measurement and geometry, there's a video for that. So then we can always kind of bring it back to that one big 3-act lesson.
I think Mr. Kubinoff meant to say not anger, but excitement, right? So, but again, thank you for allowing us to go to this conference. As we continue to redevelop curricular materials, some of these activities and philosophies that we're experiencing at the conference, we'll try to embed into our lessons and units as we move forward. Okay. Any questions?
Thank you so much to everyone who presented. We appreciate you. I just wanted to just ask a wondering around supporting families with, a lot of the shifts that have taken place and kind of where we are with that. I mean, obviously we are doing this publicly, so there's that space. But I guess more at the school level, how are we supporting families with the shifts that have occurred in the Common Core standards? And, I think most folks are into the procedural fluency a little bit more than the conceptual understanding. And so what does that look like? And how are we supporting families with that?
I know most of the time the support comes first and foremost at open house evenings when they really take the time to explain the curriculum and the shifts come into play there. There are also schools that we have parent nights where we actually have math nights or reading nights, and we bring our families in to really get deep, play these activities, engage in these games with their students.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the hooks, the strategies, like all of these fun things that make, the learning a little more exciting and real, I guess, and applicable. So I would just encourage more conversations like that, more opportunities for families to be a part of this process, ongoing and consistently. Thank you.
And that just reminded me, Mr. Merck, as we update our curriculum with these great ideas from the conferences, we should also take the time to update our website as well. We do have a big page on our website, Helping Your Children with Math. So we should start incorporating some of these ideas as well into that, updating that. And then the final conference was the SAS Institute 2022, which took place in December, and Mr. Passetti and Mr. Mark are going to share some of that.
Yes, I'll go first. There were a number of sessions I attended at this conference dealing with just how do we approach mathematics today with everything that we know, brain-based learning mainly. And the one session I attended was by Dr. Paul Riccomini. He's a professor at Penn State, and he talked about retention. And not retention in the sense that, students being held back, just retention in terms of students recalling information. And right now, there's two types of practice. The main type, which is called block practice, where we provide students with a number of problems that are the same type. And what Dr. Riccomini was recommending during the session was to use what's called an interleaving practice format, whereas we're taking previously learned concepts and interweaving them more often throughout our daily practices of what's going on currently in the classes. And through the studies that he's made, he works, he's a math professor, but then he also works with a lot of school districts with their special education departments. And what he's learned from this is that students, they obviously will perform better on assessments, but they'll retain more for longer. So he provided the strategies to try to implement this interleaving practice format that, again, as we are redeveloping materials and looking at our curriculum, that we're going to try to put that in place. And we think it'll go a long way with our students being able to recall concepts without constantly having to reteach it. And that's the goal with that.
So as a kind of consolidated effort, a number of the sessions that I had attended were revolved around universal design for learning, or UDL. So it's not a new concept or a new overlay or framework, but it is something that we are increasingly interested in. The IU is increasingly interested in as well, to bring into our districts in Montgomery County. So as an analogy, kind of think of it like the curb cut. So all of us, when walking on the sidewalk, may encounter a little cut in the curb to accommodate folks who are differently abled. This is a curb cut that we all use, though, for different purposes. When I have one of my 3 children in a stroller, I'm using that to get them up onto the curb. Perhaps I don't want to potentially trip over the curb, so I use it. So the design around one thing, which is that curb cut, is supposed to apply to all. The same way that we design our lessons, design our content, design access and equitable access for all of our learners to achieve and grow, is the same principle as the curb cut. We need to provide pathways for them in every lesson, in every unit, and make it accessible to all. And so a number of the sessions that I attended were hosted by various IUs across the Commonwealth, as well as the Pennsylvania Department of Education. Walked away with some excellent resources for making those overlays possible in our daily lesson planning, our unit planning, and so on. So we're very much in the beginning phases of how to do this and unrolling it in different content areas. I can say confidently that the teachers at the middle school and the English and history departments have really hit the ground running with it and have provided some really remarkable opportunities for kids to showcase their work in ways that they may not have otherwise done as an alternative. So it was very exciting to bring that back and to continue that work. As a member of the IU cohort for the Literacy Council, I'm also a part of a small UDL cohort with other neighboring districts where we're starting to get that work underway. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions about the SAS Institute? Thank you. So the next thing on our agenda is basically an explanation, introduction to flexible instruction days, also referred to as emergency instructional days. And as you could imagine, the name is about a program that is available to public school entities provided in PDE to use as an alternate approach to delivering instruction if circumstances arrive that we cannot deliver our instruction in the customary manner in which we're used to. Started with the pandemic, and that is where PDE then recently discovered we can deliver instruction using other formats if need be. A district may use 5 FID, flexible instruction days, people refer to them as FID days, in one given year. Some reasons may include an epidemic, hazardous weather condition, which is what a lot of people refer to them, but they also involved any reason that we may have inoperability of our school district. Transportation issues, something that happened with transportation vehicles, or any individual schools at that. The process for a flexible instruction day to be reviewed by PDE requires school districts. The registration window opens April 1st of each year, and then by June 1st, the district has to have their completed application in. By August 1st, PDE will make a determination if your FID proposal is accepted. Currently, for this school year, the 2022 school year, it is still being referred to as emergency instructional days for us. Same exact concept, same exact idea, different name. Next year, we will apply by April 1st and follow the timelines that PDE has offered us, so that we will be operating under FID days if approved by the board. Because these days serve in the same exact purpose, we're presenting both of them to you this evening. We do have samples that we would like to share with you on that next slide. So we collaborated with a team of administrators, curriculum, and special education supervisors, and we sat together and talked about the needs of our students, the needs of our families. If we were going to need an emergency instructional day or a flexible instruction day, what would that look like for everyone involved, all of our stakeholders? So this is a sample schedule at both the elementary and the secondary level. You'll notice that all students are participating in synchronous learning in the AM and asynchronous learning in each of the afternoons. All teachers will be utilizing their Canvas or their Google Classrooms to communicate with our students and our families on these days. Zoom links will be embedded in each of the learning management systems, as well as any other pertinent information for our families. Office hours, you will also notice, are on there for everyone, students and families. They will be offered in the afternoon. And again, the specific times will be communicated. You see a general schedule here. The principals have assigned each of their grade levels. So it could be grade 1 is going to have math at this time, where grade 2 is going to have math at this time. It will be much more detailed. But for our application to Pennsylvania, it is more generalized. Teachers will also share with their students how they are going to submit these assignments, and they have been practicing as well. Of course, we've been practicing, and I've said to the superintendent before, now that we're all ready for these days, we won't have any issues, God willing, that we have to. So how did we communicate? What?
We're going to get thumped in March.
No, we are not. I looked. It's like 50s and 60s for the whole rest of like the next couple of weeks. So how have we communicated this? You have probably all gotten communication at the end of January from the Colonial School District, and then an additional communication was then followed with our K-3 families. Reason being is because they are not using a learning management system outside of school very often. So we have resent a reminder letter to our families, giving them the specific steps that they will need to log on to that Google Classroom from home. This you are also looking at. This is a web page that Jess Lester has created that is also on our website that explains what these days will entail and includes a frequently asked questions for all of our families and students to reference at any time. You sure can.
When you talk about having the parents log on and do what they need to do, do we provide opportunities at our open houses for parents to go to a room or wherever to get the lowdown on how to do that? Because some parents are not as tech savvy as others. Some just don't, it can be complicated. It can be overwhelming and intimidating. So I know the high school has open house at the beginning of each semester. I don't know how the middle school, I don't recall how they do theirs or how often the elementary school schools have them. But I think it would be nice to have more of those opportunities for parents not to just look at an FAQ page or make a phone call, but to actually have that face-to-face time, whether it's a Zoom, whatever, or in person at those open houses, to learn how to do all of that.
Absolutely. So middle school and elementary schools do open houses more towards the beginning of the year. These will be, we do have sessions for technology for a number of reasons. It could be to fill out your forms from the beginning of the year, any sort of support at all. But moving forward, when we do have approval from PDE for our flexible instruction days, that will be something we do need to go over with our families during open houses as well. So that's a great idea to add that on.
Is the expectation on these flexible instruction days that we're delivering the equivalent of a half day of school or similar? Because I noticed that in all these cases, we do like office hours, student-teacher collaboration, almost 3 hours in the afternoon, and the periods are shortened in the morning. So is this to mirror the amount of instructional minutes that they were getting like a half-day setting?
No, this will count as a day.
Right, I understand it counts as we get credit for a full day, but
Yep.
is it to kind of mirror the schedule that we would see similarly in a half day, and that the periods are shortened? Because I see we're not doing like necessarily 90 minutes of literacy at the elementary school, only doing 30 minutes, right? So is that the idea, to shorten each period?
Correct.
To get that time in and reduce screen time so they're not spending too much time?
100%. We're looking at best practices for instructional technology. I'm trying to keep in mind our families' needs as well, because we don't want them having to worry about a full day getting this child on Zoom, this child on Zoom. So we were trying to keep in mind best practices all around while keeping some sort of consistency across all of our teachers.
The intent too, from a practical application, is to use this ideally after we've exhausted snow days that are built into the calendar, and to use them on days, for example, if we have a smaller storm that's moving pretty quickly, but has that wonderful timing of 4 a.m. to about 8 a.m., 9 a.m. Our buses can't make passes, we can't get the lots clear, but by noon, everybody's at the King of Prussia Mall, right? It's to save a day there so that we're not looking at having school on June 20th.
Okay. As a follow-up question to that, what preparation are we giving to families, or what outreach are we giving to parents to make sure that in situations like this, we have for our families that may not have access to the internet?
Yep.
How are we communicating what they can get ahead of time? How are we communicating that if you're not able to log in, obviously if we have district-wide outages, nobody's
Exactly.
But for those families that just don't have reliable internet on a regular basis or using hotspots from cell phones, how are we communicating to them the expectations and that there's not a penalty attached for their lack of access?
That is in our application process to the state, and we will be communicating that as well. Some of that is covered on our frequently asked questions. When we had completed a survey about internet access with all of our families, we were at 99%. We have provided hotspots in the past for our families. We also have the availability and have communicated this with all of our administrators, and then they have then communicated at faculty meetings. We will have paper copies of documents as well, because there just may be an issue that the computer didn't retain its charge or any other emergency. So if we have advance notice, that is much easier to plan for. And then the fallback on always is to let all of our families know this is not supposed to be a stressful situation for you. There is always an opportunity to make up this work afterwards.
For families too that need an extra device, we will supply one with an extra charger, just because kids will be competing for the same device. So COVID didn't produce a lot of good things, but it did accelerate our one-to-one. We're really one-to-one. For the folks that need it, and we want to make sure they have access.
I have a quick follow-up question. So if my child receives speech services or is a student who has an IEP or ESOL services, what does that look like for my learner?
So there would be separate sessions that they could go into that would be prearranged with the students for them to get the services that they need. So there might be breakout rooms, for example, where a student could go to be in a group speech and language session or an OT session, those things that lend themselves, of course, to being something that would be virtual. Certainly PT might be a little difficult, but it's been done before. We've done it, where we've done that virtually. So that's already set up and that's been arranged, and we did it very successfully during COVID as well.
Fairly large number of our families actually prefer to have IEP meetings now via Zoom. Helps with their work schedule, and so that was an unintended consequence. It's actually worked out very well.
Yeah, we've increased our participation just exponentially by doing it virtually.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I think my wondering is there's a difference between COVID, we were in COVID, right? So we knew what to expect. We were in a routine. So if this is like a one-off situation, if my child receives services on Wednesdays and Wednesdays happens to be a day, would I expect my child to still receive services that day?
We may or may not, but the way the IEPs are written is not that it's on a certain day, it's a certain number of sessions per month.
Okay, thank you.
Our biggest challenge, this endeavor, and we don't want to use it. We want to be prepared, and if we can use it, and to maintain continuity of education. Our biggest challenge was K and 1, because our first graders, I know we were masked for part of the year last year, but we were in the whole year. So the need for Zoom and for their parents or guardians to use Zoom wasn't there. And obviously our kindergarten too. So that was, the K-3 principals have been instrumental in helping. It's one thing for us to write the plan. It's another thing to actually implement it and see what it looks like. So we had a big meeting in here and discussion of chargers and discussion of access, discussion of supplemental services was a very palpable conversation.
Sorry, from a teacher's perspective, when obviously we won't necessarily have a lot of advance notice for some of these days, how challenging is it for them to adapt the lesson planning that they've laid out, in advance to okay, now we only have 30 minutes on Zoom for math or whatever. So, I mean, from their perspective, is it an easy transition or a really hard transition? I mean, I know they're used to the Zoom format, but just in terms of keeping pace with the curriculum and everything.
That was a big point of our discussions that we had with our teachers at their faculty meetings, department heads at the secondary level, and liaisons. The reason it was designed the way it was also at the synchronous time in the morning was that they would be able to keep pace with the curriculum as best they could and then talk about those asynchronous assignments or those independent activities that will be based off of the synchronous part in the morning. So will it be easy? I'm not sure, but after what we've gone through, I think it's going to be a lot easier than that because we're prepared for it now.
One last question regarding our electronic devices. My third grader is now carrying his laptop home, which is fine because I know we could have a snowstorm anytime. Are we going to establish a set period of time of the year when we're expecting children to commute with their technology? Like once we get to spring, I'm assuming he doesn't need it because I'm, as somebody who sees him come in and just toss the book bag, I'm of course concerned that this laptop's not going to last and how many more are just getting tossed when we hit the front door. So like what is our expectation for parents? And then also our younger ones, our kindergarten, first grade, if it gets the bag a little heavy, how we communicate that to parents, what expectations about how long.
And we did discuss that as well. Our director of technology was also a little worried about the laptops, but all laptops and devices are going to have covers on them as soon as possible. I believe they're coming in daily. So, but yes, to answer your question, there was a timeline that we thought that we would be okay afterwards. And then the discussion was going to be, are we going to continue to bring devices back and forth like a true one-on-one? Some districts do that, some districts do not. But at this point, we are suggesting that we stop that at a certain safe time.
And so the 3 snow days, I know that was a question when parents read the letter. Will there still be traditional snow days? Everybody likes a snow day.
Yeah, we actually have 2 built in this year. But I would love to say I would exhaust all snow. Some districts say they'll exhaust all snow days before doing a flexible instructional day. I can't say that because what if day number 2 is one of those days I described earlier where we can get the day in, but we don't have 7, 8 inches of snow. We don't have major power outages. So ideally, we'll use all of our snow days first, but there could be an exception. But somebody called me and said, "Well, can you let us know like 3 or 4 days in advance?" That was an actual question, and I said, I will absolutely try. I can't make any. The capriciousness of the weather is sometimes more powerful than my prediction skills. So, but we do have days that we build in annually. We have. We also have the Act 80 days that we have. Like the day before winter break, that was a half day anyway. So we still have. We have enough instructional hours. We still have, knock on wood, 2 full snow days that we could use this year. So we'll see. Right now, the 10-day forecast looks positive, but who knows beyond that?
Any other questions about that? Great. Thank you very much. Mr. Passetti is up here to I thought it was Mr. Oh, for talk about summer opportunities?
I am up here.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Did you
so
guys switch it up on me?
We did. It's okay.
Okay, thank you.
We can both speak to it. So just summer opportunities. We wanted to review again, and we won't read all of these verbatim. We had presented this to the board at our last meeting. These are all of the camps that we have available for students. The primary ones being the enrichment camp, our summer academy experience, and our summer literacy blast, as well as our summer one title programs and ESY. And PW has an MVP option for the MCIU and summer skill builders. So we just wanted to give you a brief update on the progress for each of these. The K-5 enrichment camp for technology has been filled. I believe that filled up with registration in 2 days, which was excellent. We have also, as of about an hour ago, had to cap registration for Summer Academy because we've reached 350 students, which is also fantastic. Last year's attrition rate, we had about 38 families, give or take, that had taken their children out last minute for a variety of reasons. So we do have some cushion there. We do ask for each of these programs, at least for Summer Literacy Blast and for Academy, that folks can commit to the full 6 days now that we've compressed the schedule and provided transportation and meals for all of our families. So again, we've capped that at about 350 students for the time being, with a waiting list for any potential folks that might not be able to attend the whole time or extenuating circumstances. So we always make accommodations when possible for all those families that may not sign up in time, and so on and so forth. We, in the hiring process, our team is getting ready to hire. We have a number of qualified applicants for positions. So we will be getting that underway briefly and hopefully be able to provide you with an update at next month's CCOB regarding that for our instructional aides, our instructor positions, as well as our coordinator position for those programs. Just a brief comment on progress monitoring and attendance. Again, we had encouraged families, we cannot require, but we do encourage families to attend each of those days. For those 6 days, so we can effectively progress monitor students throughout that time. For the Summer Academy program and the Literacy Blast program, we will be using DIBELS as our primary measurement for literacy outcomes, using their end-of-year starting point, and then testing them after the experience to see where they are as a post. For the Academy experience for the mathematics portion, Mr. Merck is working right now to develop a progress monitoring tool for a pre and post for those students who are engaged in that experience those 6 days. Questions?
Just one. Is it possible after the summer is over to get a breakdown of the costs that are associated with these programs, just so we have an idea of how much it costs us? So, just thinking ahead, if we fill up that quickly, maybe we might want to add something, but without knowing the total cost, it's hard to know.
We could certainly do that for you. And you'll notice on that slide, we do have in parentheses those that we are using ESSER's funds because we provide our transportation with those funds.
But those funds aren't always going to be there, so it'd be kind of nice to know ahead of time, like before
Correct.
that
Yep.
switches over.
So a brief summer reading update. We had talked to the board last year regarding the updated process for what summer reading looks like. But just as a review, we've now set up a continuous process of review. Our committee had met over the course of a year and a half, beginning right when, slightly before I arrived in the district, and then moving forward from there. What we've been able to do with great success is, one, ensure that we are getting with fidelity 3 readers on each of the texts that are recommended, one of whom is required to be a library media specialist. So any texts that happen to be passed through have to go through those individuals. I also, when given an opportunity, read the text, although sometimes 50 books can be a little bit daunting, even for me. So what we do appreciate also is getting student input on this process. So the library media specialists at each of our buildings have been collecting data throughout the year based on student checkouts using our Destiny catalog. What are students interested in? What are recommended texts for them? So we're cultivating a wide variety of resources that students are vested in and interested in. We are still fully committed to making sure that all of our selections are reflective of our equity, inclusion, and belonging initiatives, as we had with our list last year. So we're continuing to add selections that meet those criteria. Additionally, based on parent and stakeholder input, which we've also been soliciting, we have rounded out our recommended summer reading lists. And just a note, all of it is recommended unless they're taking a course at the high school that has a certain novel or a series of nonfiction texts that are required, to ensure that students have access to classics as well as the selections that we've been cultivating based on the data we've received. And that is consistent with best practices from Scholastic, American Library Association, and so on. So we have a really robust list, and we think that we'll be able to capture a wide audience for that. And I will provide an update at the September board meeting in the coming year based on circulation and what students have chosen, so we can look at the data to see what folks have been picking up.
I have a quick question. If I recall correctly, I think there was maybe like confusion. I'll just call it confusion from the part of some of our parents around what the expectation was for summer reading. So I guess, what are we doing differently this year to make sure that it's really clear? I'm hearing you say it's recommended, but I know that there's activities that are supposed to be done with certain texts. So I guess, what are we doing to make sure that that's really clear?
Yes, and thank you for that, Ms. Marino. So one of the things that we've made as a shift is for the recommended readings, which will actively be advertised on our website as recommended. Those assignments that used to be tied to those will no longer be tied to those reading experiences. They were inconsistent in terms of assessment practices. Some teachers were collecting them, some were not, because they weren't necessarily, they're not complying with best practices for what students should be doing with those readings. Really, it's about enjoying reading, loving reading, and just encouraging them to read more. So we want to stick with the recommended without having that assignment tied to it. Again, the exception being Plymouth White Marsh High School English courses that may require them otherwise.
Thank you for that. Is there a reading log or something that will encourage students to use to track over the summer?
Yes, so when appropriate, and we're still talking about where, absolutely middle school and high school. Depending on the grade level, though, we're still having conversations with the elementary librarians to find what that format may look like, what's developmentally appropriate for kids in terms of their kid writing in, let's say, kindergarten, first grade. But we certainly want to make sure that they're capturing some of that experience for sure. The one other thing I forgot to note is all of the selections that we do have, we're making available in ebook format when possible, audiobook when possible, as well as multiple languages when appropriate.
Thank you very
Certainly.
much. Thanks.
Any other questions about that? All right, and finally, this evening, we do have 3 conference requests for your approval. The first conference request is from a teacher at Plymouth White Marsh High School. She was invited to present to the National Association of Music Education. Sessions are going to address clarity for learning and focusing on giving effective feedback during music rehearsals. Diversity, equity, inclusion is also addressed. And this teacher from the high school will be presenting a session on underrepresented concert music. So she is looking forward to that. That is taking place in Rochester, New York, the beginning of April, or middle of April. So that is one conference request. Our Equity and Advancement Officer has been invited to be the representative for Pennsylvania as a panelist in Chicago. Chicago Beyond is hosting its first ever Reimagine Retreat. And it's a place for school district equity leaders to connect with one another to explore strategies for driving long-term sustainable change. So that is of no cost to the district because they are paying for everything, which is wonderful. And the final conference request is our Director of Technology. He is looking to attend the Consortium for School Network. And basically, it's for technology leaders to engage with one another in topics specific to common challenges, emerging trends, and best practices in technology. Those are 3 conference requests for you to approve next week. Any questions?
All right. Thank you. Anything else from the team? No? Okay. Is there any public comment? No? Great. All right. Then the meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.